For today's painting, we actually don't need to do a sketch, but if you prefer to have an idea of how big your rose is going to be before you start painting it, what you could do is draw a loose circle and very lightly so that the pencil line is showing just enough for you to see it. If you prefer to freehand it, we could just start wherever you feel on the page. But if you are one of those people who like to have an idea first so you know where to stop painting the petals, I might do something like that. Very loose, very light, and whatever color I'm going to use is going to be slightly darker, so it won't show through too much. But that's just a very rough outline there. And then I'm going to pull out my colors. I'm assuming everyone's got different watercolor sets, so everyone's is going to look slightly different. And then here's my brush. So, to get started with this one, what I did was I started in the middle with small strokes and then gradually made them bigger, longer as I spiraled outward. And I kind of imagine it like I'm painting a whirlpool, but with individual petals instead of water. So I'll start off with, maybe I'll do this pinkish color. My red will make a pink if I make it really light. And for this exercise, it's nice to have it really watery because if it's wet enough, we can do the wet on wet technique and apply a few layers like I have here. I have a really light layer to start with, and then I'm gonna be dropping in different, or not different, but darker colors on top to make some shadows and suggest more petals. Hello, Deborah, welcome. Just getting started here. By the way, is my volume all right? Is it too loud, too quiet? Thumbs up from Nicole. Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, the visual helps. Thanks, Susan. Okay, so this is the consistency I'm looking for with mine. It's quite watery, a little bit light because I'm looking for a pink. And you can watch this step first before you try it yourself. One thing I do to make sure I don't put too much water to where I have a really thick puddle is after I've swished my brush around, I will use a ridge of maybe my mixing palette to squeeze out this excess water. If I were to put this directly in, it's gonna make a very thick bit of water where it's difficult to make sharp lines, so I'm gonna remove that excess that way. The other way is to dab it on paper towel. And I'll start with just a triangle-like shape in the middle. So, oh, that's a little bit hard to see. I'll make it a little bit darker. Really small. And they kind of, the outer lines stick out. So that's why I say it's like a whirlpool. Or you can imagine it like a fan. Let me see if I can get this closer. There you go. So starting with that, that's the first step. I think I want to adjust my video a little bit so I'm not so close to the painting. There, I'm a little bit smaller now. Okay. And I'll know, for those of you who do have your video on, I'll know when you're done when you're looking up, and then from there I'll move on to the next step. And if at any point you feel I'm going too fast, feel free to let me know. I should slow down. Sometimes I go a little fast. Okay, my feeling is most people are ready, so next step is to start to add petals that are getting larger in size. And I like to start with like this corner right here, have it sprout out from there. I can move my brush this way or from out going in. These can be actually They can wrap away around all the way. I made those a little bit thick. You can compare with that one and follow the one that you prefer if you have a preference. And then from there, you'll just continue to add kind of in a spiral motion, more and more petals. And the ones that are on the outer edges are way thicker than the ones in the middle. I wouldn't be afraid to really exaggerate how thick the outer ones are. I find that they look more realistic that way. It kind of exponentially grows bigger, if that makes sense. So with the rest of these, and I also wouldn't mind like letting these overlap a little bit, having them blend into each other. And the key to, or the reason why I'm having my paint be this wet is so that it stays wet for the next couple of minutes. That way I can apply that wet on wet technique that we've been practicing, I think, every week now. But it's also one of the trickiest things to master, so I think practicing every week is good practice. Some of these outer petals, I did make them smaller. So it's up to you whether you prefer the very outer ones to be super thick or more thin. But something like that should do. And then I'll pause here. Hopefully this doesn't dry too much while I'm waiting. But if yours does dry while you're waiting or while you're painting like me, you can add the paint back in to ensure that it stays wet like I'm doing right now, if you see areas starting to dry. And to determine how wet a surface is, I tend to have to either tilt my head so I can see light reflections on it or pick it up and tilt it around. Right now I'm holding up a sheet that has a good even sheen across it. That's really good for even blending, if you want to look up and see how that looks as an example. If it loses that sheen, that means it's dried or it's nearly dry, and then it won't blend. So I'm going to try to keep this wet. This flower, like some of the other ones we've painted, can also be painted fairly loosely and still look like a rose, as long as you've got smaller petals in the middle, expanding outward in kind of a spiral-like shape. So what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, or you don't have to have perfectly matching petals all the way around for it to look nice. I'm just keeping mine wet right now, not adding anything new. Okay. I'll give everyone maybe about another minute or so. If you're already done, you can let me know too. Great question. I'm adding more of the same paint that I used. The reason why I'm doing that is so it stays about the same shade. If I were to add water, it would lighten it. And unless I can cover it with the same water consistently all the way across, I'm going to have some lighter parts and some darker parts. So my reason for doing this is to keep it even. Okay. Does everyone need more time before I do the next step? No? Okay. What I'm gonna do now then, before this dries up too much, is while this is still wet, I'm gonna choose, I could do a different color if I want a little bit of variety. Maybe I'll do the slightly warmer red just to see how it looks. Now this time, I could switch to a smaller brush if I want to, but I'll stick to the same one. This time I'm gonna make this mix a bit more concentrated, so it's gonna be thicker and less loose in terms of the consistency. And you can tell when I'm swishing it in my palette how much less water it has because it's barely moving there. That's an alright consistency. It's quite creamy and thick. And I'm doing that so that when I drop this in, it stays darker. If I had matched the consistency, it would not be darker than the first layer. It would be just as light and I'd hardly be able to notice the difference. So that's why I'm making this one much more concentrated. And I'm dropping it on kind of the inner edges of some of the petals I did. It does suggest some shadow. I could also add new petals using this color, making little strokes. And if your paper is still wet, you'll notice this really nice blending effect. And if it has puddles though, where you have really thick areas of just watery paint, that's where the spreading will be less controllable and it'll kind of just spread all over that puddle that you have if you have that there. If you do have puddles, you can remove them by dabbing with the corner of a paper towel, just right on that puddle. This paper towel will soak it up like a sponge and it'll make that area that you have more even if the other areas are less puddly. But this is the fun part for me. It's blending colors and watching them spread. If I had applied a brush with more water in the brush than what's on the surface of the paper, I'd end up with a lot of spreading with whatever color I apply. So for example, right now I'm applying a darker red. If I had more water in my brush, then it would bloom a lot more than how it is right now. So basically, and I say this in every class as a reminder, the more water you have on your surface as well as your brush, the more your colors will spread, and then the less water you have, the less they will spread. And if it's completely dry, it won't spread at all. When it's completely dry, that's when you can do layers without colors mixing into each other as much, sometimes not at all. So hopefully you've got a watercolor paper that will allow you to do this. Some papers are less absorbent and it'll look slightly different. So if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, that might be the reason. It might be due to the paper. I used to say you can blame your supplies in that case. But yeah, that's the gist of this technique and the process for a rose like this one. Pretty simple. Basically 2 steps. You've got your first layer, which is lighter, and then the second one that's darker. And you can do the same thing with this for additional roses using any color that you like. I've also got like a peachy color here for my other example, orange. This one I have here has a bit of magenta in it. If you've got white in your palette, you can try mixing that in for a more creamy looking color or more pastel looking color. So for the next couple minutes, I'll just do another one. We can keep adding to the page. And then maybe for the last 7-10 minutes, we can do the stems and leaves. I just attach them to whatever I already have on the page after I do the flowers. Anyone have any questions so far? Alrighty. Let me know if your watercolor color is not doing what you want it to do, I might be able to give you some tips. Say it's not like spreading as much as you want, or it looks, maybe it looks uneven in spots where you want it to look smooth. Those are some issues I've run into a lot, especially starting out. I always encourage everyone to just play with the paint, experiment with stuff. This is meant to be just for fun, relaxing, and learning if you're here for that too. This medium has a reputation for being extremely difficult to work with, and it is. It can be, but if you know what to pay attention to get the effects that you want, then it makes practice a lot more easier. And that's just water levels and pigment levels in terms of the blending. And then brush strokes are like a whole nother topic. Yeah. A filler flower. Do you mean like a different, like a bud instead of a full out? Oh yeah, like you could totally do buds. Sometimes another thing you can do is paint them at different angles. And for beginner classes, I tend to just focus on one angle so it's not too overwhelming. But if you do like an angle, it's like, I think I can find some examples online. That might give it some variety. Buds are another way too. Let's see, watercolor roses. Let's see what comes up on the internet. Yeah, here's one, hold on, I'll drop this in the chat. This is painted in a similar style and they kind of just made it look like it's tilted. So overall, it's more of an oval shape. Let me see if I can just copy paste this here. Yay, okay. So this artist did this at an angle. Then you can also do, let's see what the buds can look like with watercolor. Yeah, you're welcome. That's a great question because this is quite, it's maybe static and since it's all the same shape and size. But for variety, things like this are nice. Here's an example of a bud. Oh, this one's pretty too. And maybe I'll demonstrate one or two of these for like the next minute or so, in case anyone's curious. Okay. I'll try one of the little buds. The buds looks like it has a few little leaves on top and then you're making like a cup shape underneath. So if I put one here maybe, do an orangey one. I would start with the top and then paint the bottom. The second one I posted has a nice gradient, although that takes more time to do, so I'll just do the first one. So I think they did a few lines at the top. This looks like the center at a side view, and then around it what you could do is add this little cup shape. And maybe I can have a little bit of a petal sticking out there. It's very bulbous. And for both of these buds, the artist added the green leaves, and I don't know what it's called, but the little green bits that are on the bottom side of the flower, they added that while the flower was still wet, so it blended together a little bit, which I think looks nice. Let me see if I can get the same effect. One tip I have for color harmony is have one color be in all of your colors. Doesn't have to be a large amount, like even just a little bit. It'll make it look like you have a filter over your painting. Say like if you have orange roses, add a little bit of orange to your greens for your leaves and your stems. It'll make your whole painting overall that warm, like green, or not green, sorry, orange color. And it can help make a painting look more cohesive. Just a touch of that orange is enough to warm it up a little bit. I'm doing that right here. Yeah. No worries. I'm here to answer questions and help out, so I'm glad you asked. That's nice. So that's my warm green that looks kind of like an olive color because I added a bit of the same orange to it. If you've got pink roses, maybe add a little bit of pink to your green. That's a good suggestion too, to give it some variety. And since we have just a couple minutes left, I'll start doing leaves just to show how to do those. If you prefer to just keep painting more roses, feel free. I am not stopping anyone from painting what they want. You don't have to follow me. But I'm gonna take some of my dark green, and like my tip I mentioned earlier, I'll add a little bit of red. It turns it into almost looks like a purple, but it gives it a bit of a cooler touch. And I'm just gonna put it on one side here. I like to do the outsides, like outline those and then fill it in. So here's one stroke for one side, another stroke for another, and I'll fill that in. And I like to have that consistency be similar to the first layer of the rose that we did so that I can do more wet on wet technique on here. Mine has a little bit of puddling. You can see some parts are darker. I want it more even, so I'm gonna dab it. Yay, okay. And then I prefer to use smaller brushes for thinner lines, so I'm switching to a slightly smaller brush. And while it's still wet, I'm gonna add a dark line through it because I like the soft edge. I'll try using blue just for fun. And again, making sure this isn't as watery, letting this be a bit dry. So this is my blue. It's barely moving in my palette. That's how I know it's not very wet. Oh, okay, I made that too light. It needs more pigment. You can't even see it. More pigment and a little bit more water. If I have too much water, it's gonna spread all over the leaf. So this is the tricky bit, it's balancing everything. That's the water control that everyone complains about. That just, it takes practice to get a sense of how much you want to use for the effect that you're aiming for. So make sure that you let yourself screw up a lot, because that will happen. I will keep adding leaves as a demonstration, so feel free to look up and watch anytime. Here's another one. That one's quite wet as well. Maybe I'll try a touch of brown for the center line. Now these are just for the leaves that are behind the roses. When I add leaves to stems, usually I'll paint the stems first and then attach the leaves to them. It makes it easier. And now I'm adding a mix of the brown with the green on one side of the leaf just to give it more depth. It looks a little bit less flat when you have multiple colors or shades. I forgot to do my second layer for that second rose, but that's okay. That looks nice as it is too. So let's say, maybe I'll add a rose there later, but if I add a stem, I would just make sure it looks like it's coming out from the center of the rose. It can be straight, it could be bent at parts. And then from there, I'm gonna attach leaves. First a little stem, and then the leaf shape. Keeping it watery enough so things blend evenly. I'll try another one with more yellow. Yellow mixed in with that green. So that pretty much sums up the roses with the leaves and the stems.